Well, our reporter Darren Mara is at the South Hurstville RSL Club in the Sydney seat of Banks. That is the home of the SBS World News Australia Street project. Darren is with voters and he's been finding out their thoughts on this rather tumultuous and unexpected election. Other seats Darren is watching is Lindsay in outer Western Sydney, which is being held by the disendorsed Labor member Emma Hussar. Reid, which is held by the retiring Liberal Craig Laundy. Gilmore, as we talked about, the New South Wales South Coast, where former ALP President Warren Mundine is standing for the Liberal Party in Robertson, north of Sydney. Darren, tell us what you're hearing and seeing there.
Good evening, Janice. Yes, we're here at the Pinnacle South Hurstville RSL Club. The energy and atmosphere isn't quite as vibrant as at Labor and Liberal headquarters. That's despite the mariachi band playing downstairs. Banks is predicted to be held by the Liberal candidate David Coleman, who's held this seat since 2013. He was the first Liberal to win Banks in the history of the electorate, which goes back to 1949. He is, of course, the Immigration Minister, so had he lost Banks, it would have been rather embarrassing for Scott Morrison and the coalition. Banks is a rather multicultural seat. Up to 40% of people in this electorate were born overseas. It's got a very strong and vibrant Chinese-Australian community. And Janice, as you mentioned, it's also where the Australia Street digital series was filmed, where we spoke to some voters in the electorate about how they felt about the election, about whether they were engaged or not. We've got two of them here with us, which I think you'd both agree on either side of the political divide right now. We'll start with Brian Barrett, a long-time resident of Banks. Now that we have a firmer idea of how this election will pan out, I wanted to get your thoughts on the evening, how it's all unfolded.
Well, it's quite a surprise. I can say personally that I'm elated that David Coleman has been voted back in. He's a man of high integrity and a very hard worker, and it couldn't happen to a nicer man. I just hope he continues his good job and looks after the community in the fashion that he has in the past. So.
And nationally speaking, this morning waking up, most Australians couldn't have possibly conceived that the Morrison government would be in the position that it's in, but it is in the position that it's in. You must be quite happy about that.
Elated. Well, again, I thought they were behind the eight ball, and I was extremely concerned that they'd lose. But now that they look like they're in a winning position, well, I think our country is going to be in good hands for the next 3 years.
Okay, Julia Farrow. Now, I've been watching you the last 15 or 20 minutes and you haven't had a smile on your face. What's going through your head right now?
I'd have to say I was extremely surprised and disappointed. Not so much in the fact that Labor lost, but the fact that it actually revealed what we are, as Australians, see to be important. So big issues like climate change, as John Howard said, it's a climate ideology. It's not, but it obviously doesn't take precedence over people's individual hip pockets. Issues, for example, like the human rights abuses that we are seeing on Manus and Nauru, they also don't seem to count. People are quite happy to vote back in someone like Peter Dutton, who has had incredibly harsh measures for refugees. So I might be disappointed, but the people on Manus and Nauru and the people in the detention centres are probably even more disappointed than I am.
There's been some criticism that perhaps Bill Shorten and Labor were dreaming too big, that they took their lead ahead of the election a little bit for granted. Do you agree with that notion?
I actually think that Labor wasn't dreaming big enough. I feel, there was a lot of discussion about the fact that in the future the opposition will always have to pull in its policies and have to always play safe, and I think that's what frustrated a lot of supporters on the left, is that they played extremely safe and they didn't want to make a move that might alienate those swinging voters. So no, I really think that they should have dreamt bigger and maybe offered a bigger future for Australia, because it seems that everyone's narrowed it down to just what's happening with them and not thinking about the consequences for the whole country.
Now, you have a daughter who has voted in her first federal election this time around. What are you going to be saying to her now that there's been such a disappointment for you guys?
Well, I think I was just talking to her at the moment. We're sort of leaning on each other going, what the hell just happened? Keep on fighting, basically, because, again, the issue is not the parties and popularity and, selling the parties. It's about maintaining the struggle to support good policy, good morals, basically good morals. Treating people badly, dividing a country on the lines of ethnicity and division it's just something that we should not tolerate. And she's the next generation, and she'll take up the climate change banner where we failed. And I think it's going to be a big fight, but I think encourage her to keep fighting.
Okay, thanks, Julia. Janice, I think a fairly representative cross-section of how much of Australia is feeling right now.